Hi, Paul.
Oh my God.
And we have with us today Paul Blair from Americans for Tax Reform. He's going to be joining us for a little bit of discussion once we get through our normal um, hellos and what's going on in the world. So,
Right.
Hi,
hope
everyone.
everybody hope everybody's having a good holiday. Um, Christmas has come and gone. Some people think that's a good thing. Some people want it to come back. Hey, I don't know where I'm at on that. How about you, Robin?
I am glad that the shopping part is over, but I like the Christmas stuff. I like the spirit of Christmas, and I do like the family time, but I'm glad the shopping part is behind me. I hate that. Stressful.
Okay, so it looks like we're good to go on the militia. I don't see us on VapeNet though. Hmm.
Mm,
We'll look into that
yes.
as we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so knock.
What's up?
Did everybody take Christmas off?
Nobody took Christmas off, sir.
What are you telling me?
Well, on Christmas Day, we found out about an issue coming up in Camarillo, California. It is a age restriction, a public ban, and essentially will redefine vaping as smoking.
Great.
They will have a public hearing on January 12th to discuss the matter, and we have a local alert up on our webpage with all the specifics where you can contact the city council members and give them your thoughts and opinions on the matter. I will slap a link into the rooms. Anybody that's in Camarillo, I think that's really near where Monkey lives.
I think so too.
It's like the adjacent city or wherever for where he lives. So we expect some people to turn out because it's important.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be able to get there. That'll be great.
Then we found out, and this is a vague issue. The same day on Christmas Day, there was an article in the Tampa Bay Times in regards to Largo, Florida. And the city commissioners have asked the city attorney to draft an ordinance which would prohibit smoking of electronic cigarettes in all city-owned buildings. And the reason this is kind of, I mean, normally we don't have a problem with property owners saying what can and cannot happen on their property. But this is in direct response to people vaping in the city-owned library. And this is more of a what the hell were you thinking sort of moment. It's a city library, people. There's no reason for you to be checking clouds in the city library. Then we have Greeley, Colorado, and this is the second reading, public comment period, and possibly voting on a public ban on the 6th of January. We have been in direct contact with some people in the area, and we are helping them prepare. But if you're in that area and you're a vapor, you should go and sit in a seat. And if you have something respectful to say that might have some bearing, definitely take the opportunity to get up and speak your mind in a respectful manner. And then we have an issue in Washington County, Minnesota. And this is also a ban in city or county-owned, county-owned vehicles and buildings. Again, normally we don't have a problem with this, but we should still stand up and scream from the rafters just because this is backed by Clearway.
Clearway's been a problem for us up there in Minnesota the entire last year. No reason to think that they're going to change their tune as we go into the new year.
Well, normally once they get the city-owned or the county-owned buildings and city-owned buildings, they kind of push for more. So we still have New York City, which we don't have anything on. We know that it's somewhere in the limbo, flying around, waiting for something to happen. But it's always a good idea if anybody's in New York City, just keep an eye on their city council and listen to the floors, because you never know how those New Yorkers are going to do anything.
And contact those city council people. If
Yes,
nothing's being
please.
done about it, go ahead and tell them what you think.
Yeah, I think we still have an active call to action for New York City.
Good.
For anyone who wants to participate. Down here.
Yeah, I think with that guy Costa Constantidis or whatever, the guy that is pushing the full, he knows who I am.
Constantinidas.
Yes, that guy.
You had some fun tweeting him, didn't you?
I enjoyed tweeting him. I kind of fell back on that one. Maybe I should reawaken the Twitter monster.
It was assigned to committee. I can't remember which one. It's been a few weeks since I answered that question for somebody. It was assigned to committee, and it just hasn't moved. I should hope that somebody in the New York City Council has been spoken to and realized that it's a ridiculous bill.
And one of the things we like about that one is people got so involved with that one so early. With any hopes,
Yep.
the way this will work is people stay involved enough it'll never see the floor. That would be a good thing.
That would be nice.
It's in the health committee.
So, any other pressing news that you're aware of there, not?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff on our radio program on Friday night. We had some interesting little articles that we discussed, and there was something that I thought was. We have a segment on the radio program that we call the Ass Hat of the Week, and
Yes, we do.
last week we gave that award to Chuck Norris because he has authored 2 damaging and poorly written and poorly researched blogs about electronic cigarettes. This week we gave it to our friends in Congress, our friend Dick Durbin and Harry Waxman and Frank Pallone, who are actively urging somehow for the government to force electronic cigarette manufacturers to become part of the MSA, which I thought was kind of funny. I think that one is interesting enough that the legislators don't really understand how the government works, how a legal settlement agreement could be forced upon people that were not even in business when it was signed is kind of funny.
I don't put it past them to try it. There have been some cigarette brands that have come on and some tobacco products that have steered clear of that, so it could be another
But there are
front that
still-
we're going to be fighting.
There are still quite a few companies that are not signatories to the MSA that are tobacco-related businesses. So I don't understand how, this is not it wasn't an act of Congress. It's not a law per se. It was a legally binding arbitrated agreement between the attorneys generals of the states that were suing the tobacco companies at the time. It's a legal agreement signed by a judge. It's not a law. So how could they effectively try to push companies that weren't in existence when it was signed into becoming members of the group of people that have to pay reparations for bad business and telling lies.
They just don't make it easy on us, brother. They don't.
I think that has to fall somewhere in the area of chest puffing. I mean, I'd like to think that people that hold elected office have enough scruples to have figured out that this is not really legal, what they're suggesting.
Wow, that's a loaded statement, Alex.
Well, I bet you Paul has a better idea of how government works than most of us does.
Well, I certainly don't hold any of them to that. I don't hold many of them to a high esteem, particularly those who disagree with us politically. Whether or not they think that they're making the right choices or pursuing the correct legal action. I mean, they couldn't care less. Particularly those who want to use the government to impose laws, regulations, bureaucratic framework, or even, legal decisions upon those who aren't involved in a lawsuit. They don't care. They don't care at all. And in many cases, it's about getting headlines. But in general, it's about keeping the conversation alive and keeping themselves relevant. And so, I don't hold many of them to a high esteem.
Wow. I agree with you there.
To some extent, it does. We haven't finalized anything, but it gives us a reason to put out some sort of call to action. So, for all of their grandstanding and flowery show of ignorance, it gives us an opportunity to engage. So it's not all bad.
Well, Alex, other than that, do you have any new items that are up with CASA? Then I'm gonna take a second and get a proper introduction for Paul once you've got that.
Sure. Yeah, nothing new. Like I just said, we're kind of entertaining the idea of putting something out about this letters to the attorneys general. Nothing too huge, or it's not an epic call to action or anything, but it does, like I said, give us an opportunity to engage with AGs and people can CC their representatives and senators on a letter like that. And we still, of course, have this rolling call to action of this, thank you letter to, God, why am I drawing a blank now?
Boehner?
Boehner, Upton, and who else? The third guy.
Oh my gosh.
McCarthy.
McCarthy.
Boehner, Upton, and McCarthy. So we have there's two campaigns for that. One is signing on to our thank you letter. The other is sending a letter in support to people's own representatives and senators. So nothing.
And when we're hoping that that's going to end up with some legislation right towards the first of the year is what we're really hoping, right?
Yeah, it would be nice. Yeah, the point of that, of course, is to amend the Tobacco Control Act to move the grandfather date for, at the very least, electronic cigarettes. Move it forward to a more appropriate date. So perhaps, like Boehner had suggested, perhaps the April 2014, or perhaps when the FDA regulations are finalized. And obviously we're very explicit in our language saying that this is kind of a possible solution, but it's not ideal. We'd just like to see the whole thing. We'd like to see a completely separate regulatory framework for electronic cigarettes.
And in the end, that might be the better thing for us. Let us fight our own battle.
Yeah.
Well, with that, let me go ahead and make a proper introduction. Paul Blair's with Americans for Tax Reform, and knowing that Paul is never short on words, I'll let him give you a better idea of what Americans for Tax Reform is and why it has the interest of the militia in the coming year. So, Paul, take it away.
Sure. So Americans for Tax Reform was founded in 1985 at the request of President Reagan during the big tax reform fight that took place in the 80s. And he asked the president of our organization, Grover Norquist, to found ATR and to ask candidates for elective office to sign a personal written commitment to oppose tax increases. The Taxpayer Protection Pledge is something that we sponsor, and I believe we're at 219 or so members of the House and 40 U.S. senators that have signed it, and then over 1,000 legislators, 14 governors as well. But our cause, the tax issue is obviously a particularly powerful one, and as a matter of principle, our organization opposes all tax increases. For years. I don't have to tell anyone here, but cigarettes were the #1 target for higher taxes at the state level, and then even as recently as 2009 at the federal level when they could get away with it. And so for years we fought cigarette taxes, other sin taxes on soda, income taxes, sales taxes, anything that legislators put forth as an effort to grow the size, scope, and power of state and federal government. And in many cases, particularly at the federal level when Republicans have been in charge, it's been a successful fight. We kind of naturally fell into advocacy in the e-cigarette and vapor world a little over 2 years ago when the first vapor tax increase came up in South Carolina. Since then, the fight has expanded to many, many more states, but we kind of naturally fell into it, and as everyone here knows, now e-cigarettes and vapor products are the #1 target by both Republicans and Democrats, although in many cases it's Democrats, but certainly in 2014 it showed itself to be a bipartisan bad idea. And so I don't anticipate, and we don't anticipate that fight slowing down or becoming easier. And so we expect that 2015 will be just as difficult, if not more difficult, than 2014 because no one's up for re-election. 2 states have elections, Virginia and New Jersey. But other than that, no one at the federal level's up for re-election, no one at the state level's up for re-election. And so it's going to be one of our top issues going forward, and it's been one of our top issues for at least the last year.
Well, Paul and I met about a year ago, and he and I have had an open dialogue pretty much through the whole year, learning a lot. Paul learning a lot about how we approach advocacy, and we've learned a lot from talking to them. And I was going to take a few minutes and kind of grill you with some of the questions that I've asked you over the years, so that our viewers can understand what Americans for Tax Reform has to do with what we're trying to do now, and then also help people understand why the Vaping Militia is getting behind actually a fund drive to help finance the efforts that you guys are going to be doing in 2015. And I guess the first question right out of the box is, normally you guys deal with corporations, right?
It's a mixture. I mean, taxpayers, unfortunately, aren't very good at standing up for themselves. In many cases, it's small businesses and big businesses that are more active in the advocacy realm. When there's an online sales tax proposed by Amazon, it's millions of people would be affected by a sales tax increase on all purchases made online. But it certainly does take a well-organized effort by outside groups, organizations, and bigger businesses who oppose that idea to fight back and defeat it. And that's what happened in 2014. And it's the same with cigarette taxes. I mean, for years, smokers just accepted that they were bad people. They didn't, they accepted the victimization that that politicians and bureaucrats placed upon them. And so when cigarette taxes came up, it wasn't, you didn't have 500 smokers showing up to city council meetings or state legislative hearings. You had the larger companies that were affected by it raising the issue, funding the research. Some of what's going on now in the vapor world, but unfortunately, because consumers and individuals have jobs and don't make their living as advocates in most cases, it is larger companies that fund advocacy efforts. But it's a mixture. It certainly depends on the situation in the fight.
So in that respect, when you look at the vapor industry, we're kind of a unique, kind of a different aspect of that, because there is no single corporate entity or business entity that stands forward that can pick up that expense. Because let's face it, advocacy is not free. As much as we'd like to think about it, being able to mount an advocacy effort takes money, right?
Absolutely. I mean, simply traveling, which is a huge expense. Airline tickets aren't cheap. Hotels aren't cheap. Gas isn't cheap, although it's cheaper now than it was 2 years ago, thanks to oil we're getting out of North Dakota. But it's not an inexpensive endeavor to be an advocate full time, and it's certainly something that takes an organized effort with. I mean, look, in the vapor world, you don't have two companies making in excess of $4.5 billion in profits every year that can invest in advocacy efforts. It's just not something that this industry has the capabilities to do, and so it does take a more coordinated effort, as all of you guys know, to help fund some of the everything that goes into advocacy.
And how long's ATR been around? I mean, you mentioned the 2 years. Obviously, we're looking at the 2 years since the South Carolina thing. But, I mean, how long have you been involved with ATR?
So I've been at ATR for the last 2 years.
Okay.
I've been there for the last 2 years, but we've been engaged in fights like this, like I said, since 1986. Like I said, for years it was cigarette taxes. In many cases, it's income taxes or sales taxes. And one of the models that we have found to be most successful, and something that I've talked to you about, is coalition building, and something that I think people in this industry can do a lot better. Just because someone doesn't vape or own a shop or have any financial or personal interest in this product does not mean that they don't care to work with this industry or consumers to help fight taxes and onerous regulations. And one of the things that we've done since the early 90s is put together center-right coalitions. So the Leave Us Alone coalition, coalitions of people across different industries, across different issues, who want the government out of their lives and out of their pocketbooks. And so this is social groups, fiscal groups, limited government groups, libertarian groups, anyone who doesn't think the government knows best. And for years, we found this to be a very, very effective model at bringing together think tanks, other advocacy organizations, consumers, industry folks on a monthly basis. So ATR, we have center-right coalitions in nearly every state, mostly at state capitals, and in big states, sometimes we have a second, third. California, we have 5 meetings. That bring together some legislators, some lobbyists, some of these limited government activist groups, some friendly press, which is rare to find, but there are a few of them. And we found this to be a very, very effective model for advocacy, because even though nearly everyone in the room may not be a vapor or care about the industry, if everyone's working together, helping fight back bad regulations, bad taxes, bad government across the board, when your issue comes up, we have found that 99% of the rest of the people in the room can be helpful. They can provide a voice, they can provide an outlet, and in some cases they can provide resources, but at the very least, it's a good opportunity to network. And so that's kind of been our model for advocacy over the last 20 years. And it's allowed us to be a very effective organization, advocating across the board against bad government, higher taxes, and bad regulations. And so that's our advocacy model, and one that we've worked over the last 20 years to improve upon, and one that I hope to get more folks from the vaping community involved in. I know that Alex been to one of our meetings in New Jersey, and we have similar meetings throughout the country as well. But it's certainly an effective model for advocacy and one that we've used for quite a while.
Now, we're kind of a young advocacy when you think about it. I mean, we've got CASA, which has obviously been around since most people even thought about vaping, and especially some people in CASA that have shown us kind of the ropes. But when you look at from the outside, look at our advocacy efforts, and maybe we're a little bit different from other industry groups because we seem to have a very passionate consumer base, but we also have a very passionate vendor base, but it's a little bit spread out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's a little bit different, but I think by using some of the cues that you guys use and learning the lessons that you guys have already learned, so we don't have to learn those, that we can increase our effectiveness as advocates.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, and as we've talked about, there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic for those concerned with what's going on in this product field. So I'll give you a small example. In Virginia last year, the Republican legislature proposed about a $6 billion tax increase to pay for a number of transportation projects, light rail, potholes, all the stupid things that they want to raise the gas tax for, among other things. And we couldn't get 500 people to show up to the state capitol to oppose the largest tax increase in Virginia history. But with this, with this consumer base and with this industry, in Washington last year, there were several hundred people that showed up on a rainy weekend to oppose the doubling of cost of products sold in the state, 95% wholesale tax, which Governor Inslee proposed again for this coming session. And so while the resources are not yet organized to the extent that they are with some other industries, the consumer base is far more passionate than any other issue field that we've worked with or in opposition to. I mean, when legislators propose sales tax increases, you don't have 500 moms show up saying this is going to increase the cost of their groceries, despite the fact that it will have a extremely hurtful impact, on their pocketbooks and bottom line. But with this product, I mean, when legislators have threatened to increase the cost by several dollars or double the cost at wholesale or retail, that enthusiasm gap does not exist. And so while there's a lot to be learned in terms of coalition building, utilizing the network of advocacy organizations outside of the vapor consumer industry world, the consumer and industry enthusiasm is there, and that just doesn't exist elsewhere, in my experience.
That's fantastic to hear. I mean, it's great to hear that we've got that. We've talked about, and Knock and I have been saying this since probably February of last year, that 2015 is, as far as vapor is concerned, the year of the tax. And now you're on the front lines there, and so even at this point, what's your feelings on that?
Well, in 2014, it came up in more than 15 states, tax increases, that is, and was defeated in all but one, North Carolina. They raised the tax in Minnesota to 95% wholesale. But I anticipate that the number of states where this issue is going to come up is going to be more in 2015 than it was in 2014. And I think that there have been lessons learned, particularly by legislators, on how to, I don't want to say stealthily, but maybe stealthily get this stuff accomplished and through. There are a number of states that I envision for 2015 that'll be most problematic, and some of it does coincide with cigarette taxes, actually. One of the things that everyone should look for is, obviously, the states where the cigarette tax is the highest are those who have the most vested interest in protecting their monopoly on cigarette sales. So look at a state like Connecticut, where cigarette tax is $3.40 a pack. I anticipate that that'll be a top target for 2015. But same with Maryland. I mean, they've got cigarette tax of $2 per pack. The last governor who may want to run for president raised taxes 40 times, including on rain runoff, and so that legislature certainly shows a propensity to raise taxes on everything they can. Fortunately, Governor-elect Larry Hogan, who is a Republican, has a different view about taxes and may be more helpful, but it's certainly a state where the legislature is not going to be helpful. New Mexico is another one. Fortunately, Governor Martinez has, I don't know if she said it publicly, but she's told a number of advocates in this field that she would veto a tax increase if it came before her, and that's our experience as well. I mean, she is a solid fiscal conservative, but the legislature may not be as informed as she is, and so I think that's another state to look for. Going down the line, I mean, Ohio as well. This is just kind of a carryover from 2014. On every single year, we actually do a naughty and nice list of individuals, politicians, so on and so forth, who are best behaved and most misbehaved. And we put John Kasich on our naughty list for 2014 because he proposed tax increase on everything from natural gas to tobacco to e-cigarettes, and I suspect that fight will continue and come up again in 2015.
Wow.
Oregon, that's another state. They've got they were one of the only states, and I don't hold me to this word, but I think Oregon may be the only state in the entire country that got more Democrat after the November elections. Democrats picked up seats in the legislature. They won all the statewide seats, and so there was a little bit of an emboldening that took place with Democrats in Oregon. So that's definitely going to be a state where we've got issues. I don't know you guys are preparing for that. Pennsylvania. Now, despite the fact that the legislature, Republicans picked up a couple of seats in the legislature, the incoming governor is not a friend of the limited government cause or movement. And so it almost came up in 2014 kind of as a last-minute budget fight. But I suspect that in 2015 there'll be some reconsideration in Pennsylvania as well. And then the last couple of states, Utah, we've already seen a bill filed there. The governors already came out in support of e-cigarette taxes. And Utah's a unique state, despite the fact that they are mostly conservative. It's a state that likes to impose sin taxes on bad behavior. And that's just that's just Utah for you. And then the last two states are Vermont and Washington. Two states with cigarette tax above $2.70. Washington's 3.025. As I said earlier, Washington governor's already came out with his proposal, and Vermont's going to be the last state. So that's kind of where the biggest threats for 2015. But you're always going to have an expanding list as legislators find out about this, as some people have called untaxed and subsidized product, which is so far from the truth it's laughable, but unfortunate because legislators take it to be true. And so that's kind of where we see the landscape for 2015, and it's not going to get any easier in 2015 than it was in 2014.
And Paul, I think one of the biggest and scariest thing is there are two states that basically taxation has already got there's already a foothold in. You've got Minnesota and you've got North Carolina that already have existing taxes for e-cigarettes. And what's interesting is and as an advocate, is the one thing that I think is missing is there's no cry foul. Everybody, as far as everybody from the outside is, oh yeah, we've got the tax and we're doing okay with it, and that's a bad message.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the in North Carolina, which Councilman Londell Reynolds Brown of Philadelphia didn't know or just lied about, the tax has not yet gone into effect, and so what would be is if there was a lot more. This is what the impact is on the industry. This is what the impact is on my business or from consumers. This is what the impact is on me. For consumers in Minnesota, it would be helpful to have an organized effort for consumers in Minnesota to say, look, this is what you've done to the products that I attribute to saving my life. by increasing the cost fourfold, doubling it, chasing sales online. And plus, Minnesota is the hotbed of unnecessary regulations at the county and city level as well. But yeah, I mean, it would be from an advocacy perspective, to have consumers within states, North Carolina and Minnesota, helping with efforts in other states to speak out about what the impact is on them, their business, and the industry. It would be more helpful. But you have to have an avenue to do that. You have to have a consumer willing to write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, or at least it's willing to work with advocacy organizations like CASA or you guys or us, or SFATA, or but that's necessary, and that kind of is part of what we were talking about earlier. The resources have to be available for us to coordinate in an effective way, so that we can help amplify the message of the local mom and pop business owner in Minnesota who's nearly put out of business because it's prohibitively expensive to sell e-liquids in Minnesota, other than online. But yeah, I mean that's part of the bigger conversation.
I know one of the things that you and I have talked about, and the militia board has talked about, is through the upcoming year is right after the first of the year, there's going to be a blog entry that goes up that has some information about Americans for Tax Reform, and at the bottom of that blog entry is going to be a link that's going to take them over to the Americans for Tax Reform site. And you guys are a 501c3 company.
Yeah, we're a C3 and a C4. That allows us to have an educational focus, or for those who may want to have a tax write-off. But it also allows us to be directly involved in advocacy. And so we have both. We have the Americans for Tax Reform Foundation and a C4.
Okay, and on that link, there is the ability so that we can have people send donations to support this specific effort. And the goal that we're trying to do is there's 50 states out there, and we're trying to garner $1,000 from each state to help fund the budget of this particular effort. And this is a resource that will be made available to the entire vaping community, not just the militia, when we do it. And so it's not a very high mark for each state. I mean, this isn't saying if things move you and you want to throw more money at it, hey, we'll use it in a bigger and better way. But there's a lot of things that I'm hoping down through the year that with the efforts of the militia, CASA, SFATA, and anyone else who comes forward, that'll all be available to use through the resources in the network that you guys have already got.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of tools in the advocacy in the network of advocacy tools that can help increase the effectiveness of this fight in many ways. Whether it's robocalls or patch-through calls or websites that generate emails, which I know you guys already have, or additional paid efforts. But beyond that, transportation costs, in-person conversations, which aren't lobbying, they're issue education, just so we're clear. Coalition building efforts, events. I mean, all of the things that get us free press, allow us to amplify the message of those engaged in this fight. Build coalition partners. It all allows us to be more effective, and a little bit goes a long way, because this is an issue that we're already going to be focused on. But the more resources that are available, the more that we're going to be able to do as these fights come up in the 15 or 20 or 25 states that they arise in.
Fantastic. And I know you said you'll be joining us you'll be down in Tampa at VCC Tampa. So anybody who would like to meet Paul in person and question or grill him on anything that they do, I'm sure he can take the grilling. He's done pretty good for the year that I've known him. So that works well.
Absolutely,
Robin, Alex, any questions?
Nothing I can think of right now, no.
How do you feel about New York? You mentioned other states with excessive tobacco taxes. Where does New York fall on that scale?
Well, I mean, New York, they're at $4.35 cents a pack. They are so. There's the Mackinac Center, which is a think tank, actually did a study 1 or 2 years ago on the states with the largest net migration of illegal cigarette sales. New York, unsurprisingly, is the #1 state for imported untaxed, non-stamped cigarettes. 57% of all of the cigarettes sold in New York come from other states and are untaxed. And so, back to the original question about what the motivations and incentive is for a state like New York to go after these products. They want to protect the large sums of money that they get from cigarette sales. But one thing that we found, and it obviously makes sense, the more that you increase cigarette taxes, and this if vapor products go in this direction as well, you chase products, you chase product sales elsewhere. If in 15 states vapor products are made 95% more expensive because of these outrageous wholesale tax increases, number one, most people are going to be getting their products online. Or number two, they're going to be buying them across state border lines, and there's going to be tax leakage and product leakage, and so that's what's happened in New York. Despite the fact that they have the highest cigarette tax in the nation, and that doesn't even count what goes on in New York City, where there's an additional cigarette tax applied. They also get the #1 most smuggled cigarettes in the entire country, and so they're collecting less revenue as a direct result of those tax increases, and that's what will happen with vapor products as well. Any of these fools who think that increasing taxes on e-cigarettes and vapor products will automatically lead to increased revenue for the state, number one, they're lying to you. I don't think they actually think that, because they know what's happened with cigarette sales. But that kind of goes to explain why it's simply about protecting the monopoly on the cigarette market, because people go online where products are not subjected to sales tax, because the federal legislation that would have permitted that was blocked this year, so it's any state where you've got high cigarette taxes, that's where we're going to have a problem. So New York is certainly one of them. Fortunately, because of power sharing among Republicans and Democrats at the state level, I don't anticipate this will be a top target for statewide tax increases. Don't hold me to it, but I don't anticipate that New York overall will be a state where all the way through, I don't think the governor is going to see a bill on his desk. He may, but if I had to pick top 15, it would probably not be in it.
One of the questions from chat was, does anyone at ATR vape, and does Grover vape?
I never smoked, but if you come into my office, and Greg Connolly of AVA can attest to this, my entire desk is filled with all of the free products and samples that I've collected at conventions and shows over the last 12 months or so, and so I always have a number of ATR employees, my colleagues, and others who stop by and go, what the hell is going on in here? Are you running some sort of market out of your office? So I vape occasionally, but Grover is well versed on the difference between open systems and closed systems. I've explained him the whole thing, and he's a pretty hardcore enthusiast. He in conversation, because we because of how long we've been around and number of issues that we work on, we have regular conversations with a number of legislators, a number of governors, presidential hopefuls, and I've made sure that in a number of those conversations, and because he's such an enthusiast, he brings up the issue. I mean, the fact that this is a growing constituency of leave us alone voters, it's powerful for Republicans who claim to be part of the Leave Us Alone coalition. And so the fact that there are people running for president who may want to reach out to a constituency of, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million people who either on a daily basis or at least a couple of times a month have used these products. If half of them are engaged and care about the regulations and taxes imposed on these products, I mean, that's a very large constituency. And so, Grover's an astute political mind and talks to these guys about that often. And it's something that they have picked up on. I mean, even some Republicans who may have been on the wrong side of this issue in 2014, a year from now, I wouldn't be surprised if they reverse course publicly, particularly if they decide to run for president. And so, while I don't vape on a regular basis, I've certainly got a myriad of devices on my desk at my office. I've got a few in my bedroom too, and Grover's.
I would say we entice you to the dark side, but I do know you vape zero, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So looking forward from here, as we go along, this is kind of a learning process on both our sides, where you guys are going to learn how to use our active database, or our active base of consumers in a way you guys have not had available to you before. And of course, we will try to glean as much information from you guys' experience. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys throughout the year.
Absolutely, me too.
Anything else, Alex?
Looking forward to seeing you in Tampa, and maybe I'll make it back out to the diner in New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Paul, you're welcome to stay with us if you'd like. We've got we're going to kind of twist the show a little bit for the last hour, and we're going to start talking about our predictions for the coming year. And it's a little bit different because a lot of people will make these crystal ball predictions, but what I've asked our people to do is to give predictions that are based more in fact than just folly. So we're going to lead off with...
I'll stay around. I'll stay around. I'll let you know if I think you're all wrong.
There you go. That works.
Great, Paul. Thanks.
And I'm going to put Robin on the spot first.
Everybody likes to put Robin on the spot.
I do. So what do you see coming up in the year in the year that's coming forward, Robin?
I see a problem, but I see maybe a possible solution. You know?
Okay.
So something that I see as a problem is that, there's all these calls for action, and, we have to get everybody to go and show up at the hearings and all that kind of stuff. And I think that by the time we get to that point, it's too late, because the politicians already have dollar signs in their eyes, and once the dollar signs are there, I think they're hard to get rid of. So I think that if we could get everybody, especially the vendors, to, and I don't know what other word to use. I always say to get them to, court the politicians. Go bring them lunch. Have lunch with them. Write to them. Let them know they're there. Let them know that they're registered to vote and that they do vote. Let them know that they opened up a shop where there used to be an empty storefront, that they employ 12 people who maybe, some of them didn't have jobs before, that those people decided to move and live closer to the shop, so now they're paying into the city wage tax. Philly has that. I don't know if all cities do, but Philly does. They're living there, so they're paying into their school taxes. The store has the business privilege tax, all that stuff. That stuff is already happening. So if they can get the politicians to realize that this is a good thing, the things they're already doing, maybe we won't get to the point where Noct and Alex have to do calls for action. My Christmas wish is that they wouldn't have to do that so much. And I don't know, I think maybe that's a possible way to help that problem. But I do think that if we, here comes my cat, I do think that if we don't find a way to do a little bit better with that, we're going to see more taxes coming through. It's just what I think.
Wow, I think that's very insightful. I think you're well on the way to what we need to be doing on a regular basis. Comments on that, Alex? Doc?
Go ahead.
On what she said about
Yes, what she said.
being proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that we're in for a rude awakening, and we've done really well, and we've been very good about getting things after the fact. I really think that maybe after we lose something really big, my prediction is that the vaping world will wake up.
Wow.
So we had
That's
this
gonna be
thing come up in Hawaii recently, right? And everybody, they did pretty much what we all thought they should do, you know? And it still didn't go well. But I think that if they had done what I'm thinking they need to do and started before it even became an issue, a thought in some politician's head, maybe it wouldn't have gone that way. I mean, I don't know. That's just what I think.
The Hawaii thing was pretty different than what we've been seeing, because this was the second time that had been up, and earlier in 2014 it had been a different city council, and after the election some new guys came in and they pushed it through, and instead of a win like it was earlier in the year, it turned into a loss, which was sad.
Yeah.
But we had already won that fight, and then we had to turn around and fight it again.
You know, I think I want to call this style of advocacy Smokey the Bear advocacy, because
It's exactly it.
It really goes down to prevention instead of response.
Yep. What's my line I always say? I always say it's easier to prevent a fire than it is to put one out. That's what I always say.
And that's a total different way. I mean, nothing against those who've come before us and said, get to the city council meeting, but we really have to take that step where contact your congressman, and not just send them an email, just tweet at them, just make the phone call. I mean, you need to see them face to face.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think prevention's huge, and you guys know that I think like a nurse. Obviously, I think like a nurse, and preventing something is easier than dealing with it once it's here. Even a cold. Like if you wash your hands and you do all that stuff you're supposed to do to prevent a cold, and you don't get it, that's awesome. But if you do get it because you didn't do that stuff, you feel like hell. So yeah, prevention's huge. I'm sorry about the cat hitting the camera.
Alex, any commentary on that?
Well, I kind of roll into my own prediction. Obviously we're working alongside you guys to, I think, encourage people to be proactive and really, we're trying to use the tools that we have to contact people with their lawmakers in advance of a hearing. My kind of prediction as far as this goes is that our goal is to get better at that, and more and more people are coming on every day. Our membership continues to grow, and so out of that, out of a large group of people, it really only takes just a couple people to really become engaged enough to take advantage of these tools and get out there. So I predict we're going to see more leaders coming online this year and taking a more active role with carrying on these conversations with lawmakers.
Boy, that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I have more predictions, but
yeah, we'll come back to those. Anything else you want to say, Robin, before I turn it over to Knock and let him torture us? I mean, talk to us.
Oh, give it to Knock.
Okay, Knock.
Thanks.
I always get to be the boring guy. How come I'm not moving on screen?
You are moving now.
Okay. So 2015, we've already made the prediction. We've been saying that we are expecting to see tax issues in 24, 28 states, or 48 states, excuse me. Texas, for example, that's where I live. We have 5 bills already pre-filed. I've tried everything I can do to get a meeting with the author of 2 of those bills, and the local, because he's my district representative. I do think that we're going to see a lot more of the type of tactic that I'm seeing where nobody's even interested to talk about it. Because we're doing the thing that we should be doing. We're trying to be proactive. We're trying to get in and speak to the author of the bill and explain to him the error of his ways. And I really do think that our enemies have already gotten to them, you know? And I really see that it's going to be harder and harder to get in, you know, the door. But I think that there's going to be some responsible legislators out there that may actually allow us to get in there. So that's why, you know, we need to continue to try. As far as, you know, Paul's got the better idea, you know, what states are more prone to push tax issues through. I still think that they're going to be attempted in all 48, whether they get passed or not. Somebody's going to write a bill. It may not ever get anywhere, but we're going to see it happen. But I think that we really are going to lose one of these fights really big. And everybody that's sitting on the sideline waiting to make that step over and get in the game, I think that major loss, whatever it is going to motivate people.
And, you know, just to add to that, you know, one of the things that we've been working on in the last quarter and is a major focus for this year for the militia is to get in there and get state groups established so that we get a lobbyist on the ground that's working with us in those states. And sometimes that lobbyist is going to help that passionate vapor or that passionate business owner get that appointment, because their contacts and being able to get with the aides of those people or even like that is going to make those chances when those doors are closed a little bit more chance to get in there and say something. So I'm hoping that your prediction's right in that people do get forward and start getting proactive, but I hope that those groups that we're helping to form where we get that lobbyist in that state, I hope that pays off for us to help make that a reality.
Well, and that's also, you know, we've started consumer groups in over 40 states. Whether they're, you know, active or not, there is something in place already. We just need people to step up. In the states that have inactive groups, somebody's going to have to step up and take a leadership role, or kick it into gear at least. And, you know, we have different organizations popping up now, you know, the Smoke Freeze and, you know, the SFATA chapters are all starting to pop up. The issue that I have is if there's already one in your state, one or the other, somebody, you know, needs to just get in line. Everybody's going to have to get in line behind whatever organization is already there.
Yep.
If there's already a SFATA chapter in your state, jump in and start working with them. If there's a Smoke Free in your state, same thing. The issue is when we have two organizations in the same state trying to divide the support. And I actually see that that's going to happen probably in a couple states.
Yeah, I'm hoping not. I'm hoping we can get in there and intervene and try to point people in the right directions.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I predicted sometime in June the FDA will release their final regulations.
You're a brave man. Somebody's got to be wrong, right? So, commentary on that? Robin, anything?
No, not really. No. I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I on the utilizing, I guess, from a larger perspective, and obviously there's some self-serving bias here, but you need to have, they don't always have to be outside the state, but outside voices who lend credibility to all the arguments you're already making on the impact of regulations, on the impact of taxes. Now, it's certainly helpful if those sorts of figures and numbers existed within the industry, but that's difficult given how disorganized and new these products are. But when we write an op-ed, or when a state think tank writes an op-ed, or when the local chamber of commerce writes an op-ed or talks to a legislator, if they don't have, and if we don't have data on the number of shops, the number of consumers, number of businesses, all of that stuff, it makes the piece and the talking points more bare. And so on the point of you want to have one industry or consumer group in each state, that's important. And those consumer and industry groups need to be working with the local and state chamber of commerce. They need to be working with the state think tank. And if you don't know the name of the think tank in your state, that is probably going to be helpful. Go to spn.org. The State Policy Network has the list of all of the conservative to libertarian think tanks that are mostly friendly to the Leave Us Alone coalition argument. Reach out to those folks. I mean, those are people like myself who are advocates in the limited government world and want the government leaving us alone. And so if beyond having consumer and industry groups in each state, you guys should be working with your state think tanks and of course us, but working with your state think tanks, because in a lot of cases, the state press, local media, when they're looking for alternative voices, in many cases they go to these established think tanks and entities, and they vary from state to state. I mean, think tank in Arizona has more than 40 staffers. Think tank in Virginia has 2, and so they certainly vary. But to have a credible outside voice from within the state that is not an industry or consumer group, but identifies with your issue from an ideological perspective, using some of the same talking points that you intended to use, it's extremely likely that, number one, your voice will be amplified, but 2, it's likely that more people are going to listen to what you have to say. And so that would be my advice to picking up on what was said about groups within the state, is to definitely utilize those resources as well.
That's a great point. Alex, any commentary?
No.
Okay, then I'm going to put you on the spot. You have the floor.
Well, it actually it's not so much a commentary on what Knox had said, but maybe it is. I would say I'm a bit fearful of this big loss, but I would say that I think we can look forward to some wins. I know that there's an amendment introduced in New Jersey to allow for people to vape in vape shops here, and I would not so much a prediction as something as I would like to see that in places where bad ordinances have passed, I would like to see people challenge that and push for amendments. A lot of this, I think, for the past several years, kind of the theme has been, we don't want to reach out to people in advance of these things because we don't want to stir the pot. But in a lot of municipalities, the pot's been stirred. So there really is no harm in people. Now I'm scared to use the term lobbying, but there's no.
It's issue advocacy.
Issue education.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with people reaching out to their lawmakers, educating them, and I think advocating for amendments to existing bad ordinances. So just to put that out there is something I'd like to see. And then I think we're going to see the media coverage reach, I think, sort of a fever pitch in advance of the FDA regulations coming down. Somebody else had mentioned they've sort of drawn this deadline of June whenever this year, or I'm sorry, 2015, to release the final regulations. Obviously, I think we're gonna see the same kind of brat pack, trying to put pressure on the FDA to get that done. That includes our legislators and the alphabet groups.
You mean the Durbin Harkin camp?
Yeah.
I refer to that as the Mickey Mouse Club.
The Mickey Mouse Club.
We don't have to deal with
Accurate.
Harkin anymore.
Yeah, I think Harkin's out, right?
He's done.
Yeah. But whatever, the one falls down, I'm sure someone.
Yeah, somebody
pops
else jumps
to
up and
replace
takes
him.
that mantle. It always happens that way in the cartoons.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in 2015, there will be less of them.
That's
Less
true.
of them.
There are less clowns now in Congress. There will always be some, but there are less in 2015 than there were in
Yeah.
2014.
So yeah, that was the last round of elections. I think actually went to somewhat in our favor, so I'm relatively new to this, so making legislative predictions are sort of outside my wheelhouse a little bit. Yeah, somebody else had mentioned. So the FDA has drawn this line in the sand of June of 2015 to release their final regulations. But the point should be made over and over again. I think they extended their deadline to introduce those regulations 4 times since 2009.
Yep.
Or last year they extended their deadline I think 2 or 3 times alone.
It was twice just in the last year.
Yeah, so there's no. Go ahead.
If there's anything the federal government's good at, it's missing deadlines. See Obamacare.
Yeah.
Well, don't you forget your April 15th deadline, though.
Oh yeah, don't forget that one, or they will come after you. Though fortunately, in the last spending bill, the IRS lost $400 million, so there are now going to probably be less of them to enforce it. But everyone should pay taxes and pay it on time.
Okay, Alex, anything else with that?
And obviously, I'd like to see. I think this is a pretty softball prediction, but an uptick of good quality contributions to the scientific literature regarding safety and efficacy of electronic cigarettes. Oh, and since we were on the topic of coalition building, I forget where it. I think actually the Drug Policy Alliance put something out within the past week about. I don't know if it was exclusive to electronic cigarettes or if it was just tobacco users in general. But the harm reduction discussion is absolutely part of the larger discussion of the drug war, and so I predict, hope, fingers crossed, that a lot of anti-drug war people will be paying attention to this and be supporting us as well.
One of the things that I wanted to kind of amplify on that you brought up there is I'm really hoping that those people who are willing to step forward and help with local legislators in bringing forth ordinances that are clarified and smart finally compared to the insanity that was passed. I'm really hoping that comes up, and I'm hoping that we on the advocacy side have the correct structure to help those people do that correctly, because that's something that perhaps is not in our wheelhouse on drafting local ordinances.
I've thought about it myself. Before we came on tonight, I've thought about it a couple of times. I mean, I've never sat down and tried to draft a bill. It's so foreign to me.
I'm sure that we can get some help.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the strange life goals, I think, maybe, that every legislative director should have, is to sit there and try to draft a bill.
I'm glad I
It's
gave that
not.
title up. Knock, that's in your department now.
I should say
I'm shaking my head. No, I'm not going to help them regulate me.
I mean, to some extent, a lot of this, crap that we're seeing it's boilerplate somewhere. And I understand that there's probably an art and science to it, but words and language are things that I think we all can master. So,
Well,
I think it would be an interesting project.
Obviously the pathway to legislative framework hasn't really, it's not too long because we've only been dealing with this for 2 years now at a real level. But as cities and states develop ordinances or legislation that's helpful, in many of our the meetings and coalition building that we do, legislators ask us if we have examples. I mean, because we talk about organizations like ours, we talk about tax reform or educational reform or transportation funding reform, whatever it is. And legislators aren't creative people. I mean, they're us, except they decided to ruin their lives and run for office. And so, they look for examples of what other people did. There's no problem copying and pasting and providing ordinances and laws that work elsewhere. For example, in Washington, D.C. this past year, they enacted traditional tax reform that broadened the base of services subjected to the sales tax and lowered the income tax. Great tax reform in a city that you wouldn't really expect good things to happen in from a legislative perspective. But one of the things that they did was actually explicitly exempt e-cigarettes and vapor products from the OTP category. And I hadn't seen that before. I mean, in many cases, the products simply aren't part of the OTP category, which is why a lot of the fights that have come up, they explicitly exempt them and excluded them from the product category. And so for those legislators or local lawmakers who you may find to be helpful, there are examples of cities and localities that have legislation that's already drafted and signed into law that does the sort of thing that you guys are looking for.
And we do have the restrictions, the models of restrictions that we're putting in Baltimore, where you had sampling was exempted out of the bill, and also there was also the ability to have adult establishments have vaping openly. So, I mean, there's a lot of legislation we can cut and paste from and pick from. We do know where we had extremely good wins, so it'd be nice to go through and cherry pick those clauses. Well, Paul, I know you're new to the game, but if we were to throw it to you for a moment, would you have any prediction?
I mean, I gave the states where I anticipate we're going to have issues. But one of the, I guess a broader issue that I'm sure has been discussed before is heavily discussed in this industry and with these products and with consumers is the whole concept of preemptively bringing legislation to lawmakers. I would, for 2015, heavily warn against that. Particularly when it comes to taxes. I have heard and seen a number of emails, and know that this is a discussion that takes place relatively often. The concept of maybe we should bring a modest tax increase bill to our local legislator.
Yes, I winced on that.
So that we can avoid higher levels of taxation. That may be a strategic, long-term plan, but for 2015, it makes people like my life much more difficult when a legislator says, "Oh, well, here's an idea of what to do with a 15 cents per milliliter vapor tax, but we've got a $1 billion budget shortfall, so we're just going to make this a 75% wholesale tax. And so for people like everyone here and myself particularly, when we're fighting these tax increases, it's always much more helpful if they come up with bad ideas themselves, other than having people who are disproportionately and negatively affected by these taxes or regulations bringing it to them and saying, here's a bad idea, but don't make it worse, please promise. And so for 2015, my hope is that we can avoid that in as many situations and occasions as possible, because it makes fighting the very, very, very bad things much more difficult when these guys say, well, people in the industry are okay with a little bit of taxes, and so we'll start there and we'll just settle in the middle instead of a 95% wholesale tax in between a 6%, which is sales tax. Let's just settle on 45%, and that's a middle ground and compromise. And I don't get what I want, and the industry doesn't get what they want. And the reason that conversation happened is because someone was willing to cede on the bad policy ground. I mean, that's the bigger tax issue. And I know it's a little bit off topic, but there's lessons to be learned for what happens.
Well, how many taxes on single products did you see go down, Paul?
I'm sorry, what's that?
How many taxes on a single product did you see go down, be it gasoline or cigarette taxes in the last 2 years?
Oh, well, it's hard to say. I mean, we lost a number of fights in Democrat-run states and Republican-run states, but that's usually just the product of what the state chamber of commerce and legislators come up with. You have a number of legislators who are good on the issues and don't think that more taxes are the best way to fund a growing government. The big issue on taxes is that raising taxes is what politicians do instead of reforming government. And this is the perspective that we come at it from. And so in Philadelphia, for example, where they're currently under consideration is the vapor tax. The reason that that's been proposed is because after 16 days after raising the cigarette tax, they said, well, education is going to get more expensive, and so we're going to have to increase taxes even more. The problem is that it's not taxes that are the issue; it's it's spending. I mean, it's a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. I mean, in Philadelphia, there has been a decline in attendance. There's been a decline in students in public schools, despite the fact that spending has gone up by $1 billion and test scores have not improved. And so, it's a reform issue. It's not a revenue issue. And so that's why it's again self-serving, but helpful to have advocates outside this industry involved in the conversation, because in Arizona, where they have $1 billion shortfall, the bigger conversation is about why they have a $1 billion shortfall. It's something we kind of have to discuss when trying to stave off and fend off vapor tax increases, which they see as minuscule. I mean, the tens of millions of dollars for a lot of state legislators is absolutely nothing. And so when people come to them and say, this is going to cripple our industry, this is going to ruin a product, this is going to keep people smoking, they say, boo-hoo, we've raised taxes by billions of dollars a year, the sky didn't fall down, so go away. And so you need to have coalition partners saying and involved in this conversation to say the reason you don't need $40 million in vapor taxes, number one, you're not going to get that kind of revenue. That's a stupid estimate. But number two, you have a spending problem. You spend too much money. Your problem is not that you're not able to extract money out of people trying to save their lives by getting off of cigarettes. And so my hope for 2015 is that people stop going to legislators proposing bad ideas and hoping they'll keep their promise to limit them to those small bad ideas and not make them extremely worse.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. That's right on where I've been thinking. Any comments?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
So, like we saw in North Carolina, and I think for a brief period in Michigan with the Michigan vapor tax, yeah. We're kind of monitoring this, I don't know, fight or weird kind of cooperation between Altria and the RJR. Are there do you guys, is it limited to that 15 states that you guys put together, or do you see particular hotspots other than that list where that kind of their exchange over the weight-based tax?
Two things. The only states that could come up in are obviously states where there is not yet weight-based taxation on smokeless tobacco. I don't have a list in front of me, but it's not too many. And so beyond that, you have to limit it down to states where you may have a friendly legislature that cares about helping out big tobacco, right? Because that's what that bill. That's an industry bill. It doesn't benefit the state because it's revenue neutral. I mean, I don't know if they ended up ever actually having a revenue score on whether that was a tax increase or not. But in any case where you're trading one tax increase that one tobacco company wants for a tax decrease that a tobacco company wants, and the state doesn't benefit, you're going to be hard-pressed to find too many legislatures who say, all right, big tobacco, we'll help you out today. And so it's mostly about revenue. And so what I think may happen is if that comes up in a number of other states, the conversation will move from revenue neutral to revenue positive, because every single state legislator, Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal or center of the road, that looks at a big tobacco lobbyist sees dollar signs, and so for the products that they're lobbying on behalf of, and so it is potentially an issue, but one that I think will get away from the lobbyists pushing for them, because it may start out as a 15-cent per milliliter, but it'll end up as a 45-cent. It'll end up as a 45%. It'll end up as a 95%. And when that happens, the companies that were pushing for those things are going to step back and oppose them. And this gets back to our prior conversation about don't bring bad ideas to legislators because they'll run with them and make it much worse.
Right. I think my understanding of that's what happened in Michigan.
Yes, that is exactly what happened in Michigan. And so, because it went from small to a little bit bigger to, well, let's have a bigger conversation about how to really get money out of these guys. And so, it certainly should be a concern. But because legislators see dollar signs, they're not generally concerned about industry bills. Unless they've got a really, really good lobbyist, and it's North Carolina. If it's not North Carolina, and you don't have a really, really good industry lobbyist, it's not going to work out. And so that's my prediction. I don't want to be too optimistic because I could be wrong, but I just have to see. I have to guess that in a state like Arizona, or Florida, or New York, or anywhere else where someone may come to them with the let's do weight-based in exchange for vapor tax increase, which may be revenue neutral, a legislator is probably going to say, oh, let's take it to 45. So let's do what they did in Michigan and then make it worse. And so at that point, you'll see Altria and Reynolds both on everyone here's side fighting against these taxes, even if it may have been their idea to begin with. That's kind of how and I could be wrong, but that's how I view it.
Well, everybody has stayed kind of in one area, and I kind of want to go to a different area in the prediction and, or should I say, request that I'm going to make for 2015. And a lot of people may actually be offended by the way I put this out there, but I think if we look at this in the right respect, it'll be fine. The first thing that I would like to see is I would like to see vendors stop trying to save lives. Get that out of their head. If they would focus on becoming businesses, when a vendor contacts me now and they say, oh man, I've heard you guys' message and I love what you guys are doing, what can I do to help? The first thing out of my mouth is not join Safada, tell your customers to join CASA, not even to send money to us. The first thing out of my mouth is, are you working on your GMPs? Are you supporting the industry in testing the products? Are you moving forward as a business to do what businesses do. I don't care at this point. It doesn't matter that you're selling what you're selling, be it liquid devices or whatever. I really think that the vendors themselves have got to step up and take responsibility for this industry, and they've got to take it by the horns. They got to quit expecting somebody else to get to City Hall to save their butts. And the way that they do it is when these regulations come out, if we have these manufacturing processes in place, we can make the appropriate changes to get in line. If they're moving forward with testing so that we understand the product in depth, completely as we can, then no one can claim you're killing yourself because this chemical is there in a trace amount. And so my prediction is, or prediction and hope for the industry, is that it comes forward and starts acting like a real business. Because if they did that, our jobs as advocates would become so much easier, and we could actually focus on the big picture, which is the helping people get off cigarettes and move to a healthier lifestyle while they move forward. I'll open that to comments in the room.
Well, the first thing that came through my head was how incredibly easy it is to, for example, promote CASA. You know, it's our job to make ourselves accessible. It's our job to be effective and to offer tools to people. And so, you know, really the only thing that we ask of people is essentially boils down to a mention. You know, put a flyer on your countertop. You're done. That's it. As long as you expose people to the consumer advocacy things that they can be doing, that's enough. Maybe it's too simple. I don't know. But in line with what you're saying is that, you know, we do our best to be effective, to make this simple, so that you, as a business person, can focus on your business. And that's, you know, avail yourself of what we've put together here. It can take you as little as 5-10 minutes, and the rest of that time, you know, you can do these things.
Yeah. Knock?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, being a responsible business owner is something that we've been promoting from, you know, day one, and having the vapors support the businesses that are responsible. Yes, you're talking about GMPs. Those need to be in place, you know, and they need to be developed into an inexpensive, or at least a not super expensive version for the smaller businesses to be able to get in line with. But yeah, there needs to be some sort of standards in place.
Robin?
I agree with what Knox said. I don't really have anything else to add to that, but that's where I would go with it as well.
Paul? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, politicians are willing to manufacture crises to accomplish things that they want to accomplish. So to avoid a real crisis makes fighting bad regulations, unnecessary taxes, and crippling policies, you know, much easier. And so effort that goes into you know, exactly what you were talking about makes all of our jobs much easier, because if I'm talking to a legislator or in front of a group of legislators about you know, why they shouldn't impose a certain set of regulations or taxes on these products, this industry, and stores, and so on and so forth, and they come to me with, well, someone's died as a result of this product. You know, if it's true, I have it. My response is obviously, you know, fact-based and you know, derived of experience and so on and so forth. But the emotional toll on the realities associated with a crisis in many cases, can be much more compelling. And so any effort, resource, and work that can go into exactly what you were talking about certainly makes my job much easier.
Yeah, and I've been, that's one of the things that I've been very excited about as I've gotten more involved with the Michigan group here is all the leaders in this group, their focus right now is on moving towards GMP. Their focus is on finding out what testing needs to be done for the next diacetyl issue, the next whatever it might be. Because, you know, it's kind of funny. Everybody remembers when we started this. And one of the easy targets when the ALA came out in front of anybody was they would scream, "We don't know what's in there. We don't know what's in the liquid." Well, we know what's in the liquid. We know it's got VG. We know it's got PG. We know it's got flavors. We know it's got nicotine. But as we go forward, we're finding there are other things. There are things we do need to know about. There is testing that needs to be done. And, you know, and I commend people like Farsalinas for coming out, making a statement with the temperature study, and for the vendors for getting behind it there, though it did seem to be last minute. We shouldn't have that type of a response in this industry. Somebody should come out with an idea that is good and sound, and people should pile on that idea and fix it and make it right from the beginning. We don't need to be waiting for the last minute to fix things. And I think that's the one thing that we need to change in this industry is we've stayed reactionary on everything, politics, safety, the whole 9 yards. Even coming down to the manufacturers of the mods, you know, putting a simple sheet of paper in there that says what the expected envelope to use that product in at. Is it safe to be used for sub-O? You know, a lot of people give Mike Morgan a lot of guff over the fact that the man sells a ZNA, and if you ask him to this day, what battery do I put in there? Mike, without fail, every time will say the same thing, an AW battery. Is there any other battery in it? I don't want to talk to you. You know? And they give him a hard time about that, but that's what that man has tested his device with. That is what he is sure of. We need the hardware manufacturers to take the same stances. We need the juice manufacturers to take that similar stance. My product is intended to be used with nicotine only. That's it. It's not intended to be used with melatonin or whatever else you want to go add to the e-liquid. You know? And this type of, if we were to step forward, if the vendors were to step forward in this manner, I think it would create a different atmosphere. Instead of us having to play the victim, I think it would give us a much better stance as we go forward and as we present ourselves in front of state legislators, city officials, and having confidence in the product. So that's what I'm hoping for. So other than that, now you've been involved. You've been involved in the industry for roughly a year, Paul. Manok, you've been in here what? 2 years, 3 years now?
I've been a vapor for 3 years.
3 years. And Alex, how long have you been?
I've been, well, I guess I've been involved since I started, so it'll be 2 years in February.
Miss Robin?
A little less than a year and a half.
A little less than a year and a half. So, in some people's eyes, all of us are just babes compared to where some of this industry's been. Okay? I can tell you that I was very excited to move from V2 cigarettes to my first Pro Tank and an Ego, and I thought that was the bangingest device in the world. But you know, the one thing that we have had is we've had a year of incredible innovation. You can't even compare the devices of today to those that were released the same time last year. You know, and we have a very fast-moving industry, and we want that to continue. But we want it to continue in a safe manner. We don't need to have crazy things like what happened in Dallas, or excuse me, what in Dallas? Where was it? Where was that, Knock?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Alex and I were right there when that happened.
The 26650 that launched itself.
Oh my God.
We don't need the crazy things about people having to recall liquid because it was titrated wrong, and instead of it
Right.
being 10 milligram, it's 42 milligram. That was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've made our mistakes through the years. We've learned from a lot of them. I hope that the next year is the safest year we've ever had for vaping. I don't want to have to talk about another 26650 popping at Vape Blast. I don't want to have to do that again. Yeah, Costello, that Ego and Protein still works good.
Well, there are great businesses in this industry. You're talking about hardware manufacturers. I mean, I've had this Provari almost a year now, and works awesome. And I know, from conversations with one of their vice presidents or presidents of marketing, the extensive level of testing that they do on their boards and on everything, for temperature testing to drop testing. Everybody that's building hardware needs to do that.
Everybody points fingers at the juice guys, saying that they're the ones that the regulation is only aimed at them. But let's face it, it's across the board. There's problems in all little parts that you could use some cleanup. And boy, that would make our jobs a lot easier. So I'll kick the soapbox away, and somebody else can take the floor for a minute if they'd like it.
Well, Paul brought up Arizona a while ago, and we had an article a few weeks back on the radio show that specifically talked about Arizona's proposed tax ideas, and they had 4 proposed different versions of the tax. And they have what was their budget shortfall?
Billion.
Okay, so I thought it was funny. Of the 4, and these are all reported from this is the Arizona Joint Legislative Budget Committee, and I guess they did their research or whatever, and they came out with 4 different versions of a tax. They did one which is a 95% tax on the actual taxable sales price, and they estimated that it would make about $13.5 million. And then they did a 95% wholesale price, and that worked out to about $9.7 million. And then a 42.5% of retail, and that was at $6 million. And then a 5 cent per milliliter, and that was only $283,700. And my question, or my thought process behind this is, if they're going to tax something, why wouldn't they try a product that they knew A, deserved the tax increase, and B, would actually make a difference in their budgetary issues?
I've never known government to actually think anything through. So, I'm just saying.
True that.
I mean, most of the times it's, we did it, and it didn't do what we wanted it to.
Yeah.
I mean, even at its most, $13.5 million is not even going to touch $1 billion shortfall.
No.
So yes, the cut in spending would be a much better tactic.
Yeah, I mean, to the conversation earlier about potential alternatives, I mean, that's kind of why when you're talking to a legislator about the impact of this tax, and you use their numbers, 14 million or 9 million or whatever it is, it's a drop in the bucket for them. And so, again, the point is not that they have a revenue problem. The point is that they just had a governor who left office who had no clue what she was doing, spent too much, raised taxes, and didn't want to reform government to the extent that she should. You now have an incoming governor who who campaigned on eliminating the income tax, who worked to occasional choice in the state, and is much more reform oriented. And so the conversation should always avoid, well, here are all our alternative tax increases. It should always be an outright rejection of the idea that it is taxes that will solve their overspending problem. And Arizona is actually the number 2 state in the entire country, for the most amount of illegal contraband cigarettes on the market, behind New York. According to Mackinac study, Arizona, 51.5% of all cigarettes in Arizona, remember New York was 57%, are contraband. And so there's probably at least some recognition that if they raise the cigarette tax, that's only going to get worse. They may not generate anywhere close to the revenue that they may have expected. But the industry should begin to learn the same sort of rhetoric that exists outside the industry for fighting against the expansion of government. And it's that Arizona does not have a revenue problem. They can't balance their budget on the backs of small businesses. They can't balance their budget on the backs of consumers trying to escape an unhealthy habit, and they can't balance their budget on the backs of anyone. I mean, other than cutting spending and restraining and reforming government. And so, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely nothing compared to what they're going to need to do. Most of it will have to be spending, but at the end of the day, what happens with legislatures is nickeling and diming at the end to try to get to zero, because they have to get to zero, if not positive.
Well, what's funny about Arizona is their AG is actually, a couple months ago came out and said that that vaping did not fall under the state's smoking prohibition, and it also could not be included in the tobacco sin tax, which was, a win for us because he's, appeared at the time to be vapor friendly, and went out and wrote an actual opinion paper on vaping in following the laws that were already in place. But I don't know that the AG has any authority when it comes to writing stupid taxes.
No, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the legislature and the governor signing it. And so if the legislature decides to change the law to subject e-cigarettes and vapor products to the OTP classification or some sort of alternative tax regime, that's what happens. And so the fight is in the legislature first, and then with the governor second. But the fight should be public enough, and this is kind of a lesson for all the fights that take place. The fight should be public enough that when it does get to the governor's desk, the governor has more than lobbyists or people claiming to be public health advocates or whoever whispering in their ear, and that they've been well versed in the fight that's taken place publicly. And that's why it's important to have op-eds and get quoted in press releases, saying the right thing, not saying things like we'd be okay with a little tax, which is what someone in Arizona said. But beyond that, yeah, you got to have the fight publicly so that everyone's aware of the pros, cons, and everyone's position on the issue.
Yeah, and it needs to be very public, Snyder, bastard. But at least he and I have a working relationship now. I write him and tell him off, and they send me a form letter. So it works. During the next year, I know that the militia has a tendency to move into a couple of different areas as we go along, and a lot of people have misunderstood some of the things that the militia does. The militia responds to what we consider and understand that's what we as the board consider to be the most current issue that we can affect. And that is an interesting thing that we say about that. If it's an issue that we can't affect, we're not going to put resources towards it. or as many live resources towards it as we would an issue that we can make move right away. That's where we count on organizations like CASA and SFATA to help fight the long-term fights, because those guys, that's what they do on a constant basis. All we do is help them as kind of like um, a specialized group to be able to go in and affect one little thing at a time. And I know a lot of people have been very confused on how come you don't always see the militia come up in full force on every issue that's there. Um, we think that it was a better idea for us to be able to affect those things that we can immediately move and to gain momentum behind them. And we plan to continue to go in that fashion because all of us at the militia and everybody wears dog tags. If they've done what they're supposed to do, they're also a member of CASA and they're also a member of SFATA, and they're already moving forward in those arenas also. So, the guys in the militia are just, and I'm saying the entire militia group, including that 7,000 strong Facebook group, you guys are responsible for making changes on an immediate basis. But don't forget, we all have long-term goals that we have to continue to work towards. And we're really thankful that the other agencies are out there to keep those on track. But we have about 10 minutes left. It's been a pretty good year. I do want to thank all our viewers that have so religiously came in and visited us on Sundays. And we really do appreciate your support. We really appreciate the support of Nova and VapeNet, which, if you don't know, VapeNet will be going to Vape TV after the first of the year, and yes, you will find our show there on Sundays just like normal. So that's a great thing, and we really do appreciate the other networks that carry us through simulcast, Vaping 411, and all those guys. They do a great job in making sure our word gets out there. Robin, you want to run down a quick list of the places we're going to be again?
You know I wasn't ready for that.
Should always be ready.
Stump the Robin.
Not ready. I was away this weekend, and I came back shortly before the show. Being honest.
Okay, I can help with the first couple. We'll be in Oregon next weekend.
Okay.
3rd and 4th. Actually, Robin and I will be out in Oregon.
Yeah. Eugene, Oregon. Is that right?
Oregon Vape Fest in Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't know yet. It'll either be the 16th or the 23rd. We will be up in Washington State helping with the vendors group up there.
Right.
And then at the end of January, I will be in Western Michigan in Grand Rapids. It's a local vape meet there. After that, we've got Tampa. That's going to be February 28th. I understand Alex will be there. Paul will be there. So that'll be a real nice fun time. And Robin and Fred will be in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the weekend of the 28th. And
yes.
Then following that will be, you've got Vape Fest down in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
We'll see a lot of militia members wandering around down there.
Yeah, all but one.
That's okay. Everybody can take their turn at the table and their turns at the casino. So that'll be fine.
Yeah.
And actually, some of us will be going there actually acting like real vapors. Imagine that.
Wow.
Go enjoy it. Go enjoy a vape meet for a vape meet. Imagine that.
Which we never do.
The weekend after that will be...
It's Dallas, right?
I think
Dallas.
That's going to be Jim and Knock in Dallas. Knock will be working with the vendor group down there during that particular meet. I don't know if Jim knows he's got the table. Anyway.
I got to bring my mean stick with me.
I thought you always have that with you.
And then we'll be out in North Carolina, Vapor Slam, probably be Robin and I in North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's what we got for the first quarter, and we do hope that you'll join us at one of those locations. Also, one other quick little announcement: that the board, we did say okay with that last night, right? Didn't we? Look inside
I have no
shotguns.
idea.
Hang on.
I have nothing there.
The suspense is killing me.
I have no idea what we're talking about.
Hang on a second.
Yeah, we did
Yeah, okay,
decide
we
that.
did.
Yeah.
So starting at first of the year, from January 1st until April 1st. For those of you who haven't had a chance to get your dog tags, here's an interesting fact. For $20, you can join the vaping militia if you join between the months of January and before April 1st. And you can also renew your membership too between January and April 1st for $20 for the year. So
Right.
look forward to that. That's going to be coming up. So those people who have been waiting for a sale on dog tags,
There it is.
there you go. There's your chance. Maybe we'll get Vapor Joe to blog it. Okay, I'm just teasing. Was there enough sarcasm dripping off of that one?
I was thinking about muting my my microphone.
But yeah. So, anybody get last parting thoughts?
Actually, you know what? New Year's is coming up, and we all know that everybody likes to make resolutions. And, you know, the number one resolution made every year is to quit smoking. So I invite anybody that's listening, that's a tag member or not, if you know somebody that's smoking, that's having a hard time quitting, you know, I said this on the radio show, go out and buy a little starter kit and a bottle of juice and kind of help somebody make the change that you've made. Because, like I said, you know, we did I said it was Christmas time, now I'm going to say it's New Year's. You're saving somebody, and that's something that we should always have as a goal.
I like that, Knock. That sounds awesome. I think I'll take a couple of kids to me to the New Year's Eve party. Robin?
I just really want to wish everybody a happy, healthy New Year. You know, I think that I always go all nurse on you. I can't help it. You know, making the decision to switch to vaping from smoking is such a great thing to do, and you know, agreeing with Knock to share it with other people if you've got a friend who needs that. But just to, you know, just remember it's part of taking better care of yourself. And I really just want to wish everybody a happy, healthy New Year. I don't know if you guys are going to be here next week or not, Knocked. So you could tell them that. Like, I don't know what you're doing with that, but I don't really have anything else.
Knock will either run a show or you'll get a he'll put up Vape Militia
Like the
Radio.
radio show, yeah. Which I won't be at either.
Paul, any parting thoughts?
Sorry.
Nope. Thanks for having me on.
We do appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. You're welcome to join us any Sunday that you'd like to.
Absolutely.
Alex, my friend, any parting thoughts?
Well, just echo Robin's sentiments. Happy New Year, everyone. And I will probably not be around next weekend. This is sort of, for me, it's sort of, this is the top of the year, you know. Enjoy that period of low gravity, and encourage everybody to make the most out of whatever kind of vacation or relaxing days you have, so that we can come out swinging. I know, you know, there's, I think, almost a dozen states are in session in like within the first week of January. Something like, I think January 7th is kind of the start of a lot of this. So just kick back, relax, make the most of that, and then be refreshed and ready to fight in the new year. That's it. No puppy dogs or unicorns.
No puppy dogs or unicorns. Wow.
But we like puppy dogs.
Well, in parting, the one thing I want to remind everybody is vape safe and vape polite. Remember, when you're out there and you're in the public eye, you are what people think of vaping. Just that simple. So leave the image that you want them to have of you, not something that they have to go whining to their city council about. Just something to think about. Hope everybody has a great new year, and we are out of here. Thank you very much for joining us.